in my first university qualification, which was commercial radio, and even as I say that, I think that sounds like a made-up qualification, but it was one. I started off by riding to go there, but it was in Sydney, and after 2 days of nearly dying by riding, I decided to catch the bus. It was a bit of a... Every day you got a different bus driver when you caught a bus in Sydney. One day, we got on the bus, and there seemed to be a lot more turns between Eastwood and North Ryde than I could usually remember. We'd go a little way, and then we'd turn, and a little bit further, then we'd turn, a little bit further, we'd turn again, and not a lot of stopping going on. It was starting to get a little bit weird. Turn, turn, turn. The bus driver stops in the middle of the road, turns around to the bus and says, "Does anybody know where we're going?" At which point a young lady worked her way to the front of the bus and directed him to North Ryde. I don't care what happened after that, I was just happy to be off. But sometimes our life can be a little bit like that. You go through the week, and Monday morning you get up and you do this. You turn, and Tuesday you do that. Wednesday you're taking someone somewhere. Thursday you're doing some admin jobs around the house. Saturday you're doing the mowing. Sunday you're at church, and then you want to stop and say, hang on, where is this all going? Or on a more profound level, you get through life and you get to the end of school and you've got to think, well, where am I supposed to be going? Or the end of uni, or you start having kids, or the kids leave home, or you finish the job, and every now and then you stop and think, hang on, does anybody know where this is supposed to be going? Well, we're a week out from Easter, and over the Easter season, we're looking at how Jesus does everything according to God's plan. And today in particular, we look at the idea of Jesus being predicted. And what I think we'll see is that the predictions of Jesus show how God has a very good idea of where everything is supposed to be going. So today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at 2 predictions and then a payoff. 2 predictions and a fulfillment. It'll be a king on a donkey, peace on a donkey, and Jesus on a donkey. All right, prediction number 1, a king on a donkey. This is a quick one. This prediction is very early on in the story of the Bible, and it's a prediction to God's people very long ago in the book of Genesis. It's delivered to a kind of wandering group of nomadic Israel who are meandering through farmlands and desert, and they're trying to eke out an existence for their families and always hoping for something more. And God gives them a prediction. As we read this prediction, look out for the words of kingship and ruling. Here's what was promised in Genesis 49. It's on the screen. "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until it comes to whom it belongs, in the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to a choicest branch." See what's going on here? There's a promise for this wandering group of Israel for an end to all the twists and turns of life with the coming of this ruler, this one carrying the scepter, this king who will recognise by the donkey that is on. And it's a big promise. In those days, when it's kind of tribal warfare, a decent king with a good military and a lot of control did mean a lot of safety and certainty for your family. And so they would have looked forward to it. But it is just a prediction. It's just a promise. Just words. And it's not as though for them that God actually stepped into their life and did something to show them exactly where they should be going. And I think it's what you want sometimes, isn't it? Not some words, not a promise, but God to just step in and do something right there and then. I don't know, have you ever had those kind of moments in life where you don't actually want to know the meaning of life per se, you just want God to step in and show you where to get the money to fix the car, or you want him to make something better again. You need some sense that he's running the show, that he knows where everything's going. But it doesn't always come like that. So how can you be sure that God knows where it's supposed to be going? In prediction number 2, I think we start to head in that direction. Because there's not only a promise of this king on a donkey, there's a promise of something else as well. It's peace on a donkey. A promise of peace. Now, promises of peace are sometimes a dime a dozen. If you ever watched Miss Universe, which I can tell a lot of you have watched Miss Universe, it's probably a very popular show, but every one of those pageants, you do get the classic moment where the lady is wheeled out in the swimsuit and she flows out onto the stage and she's interviewed for her intellectual prowess. Sorry, I should check, has anyone here actually competed in Miss Universe? All right, one of the guys, I'm safe. They wheel them out for their intellectual prowess and they get out there and they ask them what they're going to do and their times tables, and then, what would you like to achieve if you won Miss Universe? World peace. And you roll your eyes and you think, please, don't promise peace. You have no hope of delivering. And we always think like that. One of the leaders of the United Nations once said this quote when he was asked, why isn't the United Nations bringing world peace? And he said, well, we don't exist to lead humanity into heaven, but to stop it from descending into hell. Peace is very hard to come by. But in prediction number 2, there's a promise of world peace arriving on a donkey. And the first people who got this promise, they'd never seen it either, which is why it's described so very carefully by God to his people. There's still the king on the donkey, but now the tanks and guns and bombs are being put away. And this peace is not being spoken by a woman in a swimsuit in a competition, but it's a peace proclaimed across the entire world. Look with me at prediction number 2. This is from Zechariah 9. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of the donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim, the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Hear what God's saying about where it's all going there? He's going to put an end to war. He's sending his ruler on a donkey to bring in a peace that can't be overthrown. And you know, with this prediction, we find out that God's people in the Old Testament, every single time they looked to God for direction, every time they looked over thousands and thousands of years, God is giving them exactly the same answer. Look out for the bloke on the donkey. He's going to bring you peace like no one else and nothing else ever could. A peace that means their enemies on every border will put down all their arrows. A peace that will be proclaimed to every nation. A peace proclaimed to you and to me. A peace that means we will put down our weapons. Not only guns and knives and fists, but sharp words and backstabbing tongues. A peace that will unite families and make Easter gatherings a little bit easier. A peace that will have God speaking to your heart saying, I know where we're going. It's a bold prediction, isn't it? A king on a donkey bringing peace. Which takes us to our final stop this morning. Jesus on a donkey. And we're going to go over to the New Testament, into John's Gospel, into John 12, and let me set the scene for you a little here. It's holiday time in John's Gospel. They're a week out from their national public holiday of the Passover. It's been happening for years, the Passover in the nation of Israel, and the shops are absolutely stacked with Passover merchandise. All kinds of things. There's special Passover bread, special Passover cups that say things like, God fills my cup. They've got the little sheep dolls, they've got the fluffy sheep ears to put on their donkeys and on their kids. They've got it all. Of course, the poorer people just had to make do with palm fronds or ice cream containers if they were us. It was the thing they did to build little huts And perhaps they even made their children make little hats out of palm fronds and parade around at school. I don't really know. But truth is, like us, lots of them had probably forgotten the significance of what was supposed to be happening that week. The original Easter had become such a tradition-filled holiday for them, they'd forgotten where all those original predictions were going. See, that very first Easter that Jesus is heading towards, it wasn't meant to be a time when religious people stamped their authority on the world. It wasn't meant to be a time when the Jewish institution was replaced with the Christian one. It wasn't meant to be a time when the lamb and flatbread was replaced with hot cross buns and chocolate Easter eggs. And only a very few people saw what was going on as Jesus entered. It's the two predictions we've looked at, and countless others were about to become a whole lot more than just words and just promises. All those predictions, all those words, all those promises were about to get flesh and bone, as those with a desperate longing to know where God was taking things had their eyes open as someone arrives on a donkey. In John 12, there are two things they knew would come on a donkey. Firstly, they knew it was God's king, from verse 12. It'll be on the screen. The next day, the great crowd that had come for the feast heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." And they knew God's king meant there would be an end to enemies. There would be no longer any need to have fear. Look from verse 14. Jesus found a young donkey and sat upon it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, O daughter of Zion. Your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." And they are jubilant. There it is, the moment, the fulfillment of prediction. God's king bringing peace on a donkey, coming to God's people. And you sort of read it and you think, it's a little underwhelming, isn't it? Just a guy on a donkey and some palm fronds and he sort of wanders in. I mean, really, I'm a Christian and I read that story and see all the stuff that's loaded into the back of it, and you get to that bit and you think, well, it's actually a little underwhelming. How on earth is that supposed to bring peace for anything? I thought this morning about trying to just kind of jazz up the theatre of that and having some palm fronds out the front as you came in and people sort of waving you in, and so you could get the whole sense of it. But then I thought the palm fronds is so unsatisfying and unusual as they greet this donkey. How on earth is that actually going to help me in my life know what God's doing and where I'm supposed to be going? You want a little bit more than a guy on a donkey with some palm fronds. You want some oomph. You want him to come in something like President Obama's kind of Cadillacs, the things that have armour-proof, kind of bulletproof armour all around them. You want something with its built-in firefighting kind of thing, something that if you shoot a rocket at it, nothing can penetrate it. You want more than a donkey. And so I'm sort of with the disciples when they say in verse 16 of John's Gospel, they don't understand what's going on. They don't really get it. But in just a week, it would all start to become very clear for them. By the time the first Easter comes, they would understand just what God meant by this King who brings peace. Because Jesus comes as the fulfillment of all of those predictions and the centre of God's plan to do something far more significant than anyone who saw him on that donkey might have comprehended. See, these people wanted God to come in and restore their national pride. These people wanted God to come in and make a safe place for their families and their churches. They wanted God to come in and make it legal for them to keep having their religious holidays and their religious freedom. They wanted him to make them prosperous and powerful, at the very least safe. when Jesus comes to end darkness and death. And Jesus comes to destroy everything that gets in the way of peace. All the words we let loose, the phone calls we should never have made, the power plays we shouldn't have done, for all the times our hearts wander to darkness and destruction. In just 1 week from the donkey, on Good Friday, Christ dies on a cross as all the forces of darkness, all the weapons, all the sin is pointed at him and crushes him, and the power of every one of them is rendered dead. All our peace-wrecking sin put onto him. And on Easter Sunday, he rises from the grave, showing that death can be defeated and there is hope of lasting peace and life in a new age for all who turn and trust the peace-giving King. And it's only after this, only after Jesus raises, that the disciples who saw that donkey thing get it and realise what's going on. So they say in verse 16, only after Jesus was glorified did they realise these things had been written about him. Where are things supposed to be going? To a life of peace under God's King, Jesus Christ. You know, if you're anything like me in daily life, this can seem a very long way off and difficult to grab onto. Because I would suggest, you want simpler things. You want a steady income, and you want a nice family, and you want healthy kids. You want those things, right? I want those things. And they're not bad things. And in fact, in God's final new age, when the peace-bringing King Jesus returns, there'll be all that and more. But God's intention has always been for something far more grander. From the very beginning until this day, God has wanted to gather a whole group of people under his peace-giving King Jesus. And the predictions of Jesus, they show us that God has always been running things according to plan. Always. In the midst of your days, it may not feel like there's a plan being kept to. You might feel like there's just one turn after another turn, after another turn, after another turn, and every now and then you want to hit the brakes and say, I just can't remember where this is supposed to be going. Look, as we head towards Good Friday and Easter Sunday, I want to assure you of this, that Jesus was predicted and that he came shows that God knows where it is going. He's always had the same plan, and he wants you to be part of it. Join the plan for an enduring and all-encompassing peace under God's King, Jesus Christ.